I'm really excited to have the one and only Caroline Stevens from Caroline Stevens Seeking the Truth, her YouTube channel. And Caroline, it's we tried this before, by the way. We had GM on, and this was via a cell phone conversation. I believe was through Skype, but it just for whatever reasons it just didn't work out. So I was a little bit disappointed by that. But Caroline, I just want you to give everybody a brief introduction of who you are, because I really want to get into your background politically. So if you want to give a brief introduction.
Well, thank you very much for having me on your show. And yeah, I'm Caroline Stevens. We're all unique. And I guess I've made a bit of a splash in the UK for seeking the truth, because most people, in fact, the vast majority of people have some things they don't want to talk about, even in the truth movement. They may have financial interests, or they may have been nobbled simply by the establishment. So how did I get into this? Well, just by luck, perchance, or an unfortunate experience, I guess. So I went into politics in 2013 after attending a meeting about how corrupt the European Union is. And I'd just been campaigning to get financial education into schools and basically upskilling and educating the kids and the parents in understanding how to save, not go into debt. And that might seem a very simple, very basic concept, but in actual fact, you know, you look around yourselves today and you may be walking to your office and somebody will be carrying a coffee that they've just bought en route to the office. That is quite a relatively new phenomenon. That's a phenomenon that's going to cost you £15 possibly a week in the UK, just one coffee to work each day. And that, you know, I don't know how much that would be in Canada, but it's a substantive amount of money. And when we're talking about the financial crisis, and not many of us can forget what happened in 2008, 2009, with a view to it being a repeat occurrence in the next few months, you think, do these people really understand that £3 a day or $6 is going to have such an impact? You know, when I went to work, my first office jobs, I used to pack up. You know, you used to do a packed lunch to go to the office, and they used to give free coffees. And of course, people say, "Oh no, I'm too proud to have those cheap coffees from work. I'll buy a £3 coffee on the way to work." But what a waste that is. You should take all advantages of your employer, because you don't know where your next cup of coffee might come from.
Well, that's a great introduction, Caroline. I couldn't agree with you more. And a lot of people have, speaking of the financial mess of 2008, people are still reeling from it, and some actually haven't even recovered. And you are right, and we don't know when it's going to happen, but they've been speculating possibly maybe this year or even next year. But what's worst off is that this one that's going to come is going to be probably the final blow, where a lot of people are going to have to start making some really tough decisions about a lot of things. But I want to ask you about the UKIP party, because I know you ran. I don't know if you want to talk about that or not.
You're intrigued by the UKIP
I
party.
am.
And I guess,
I am.
you know, being across the pond, you must be, I probably would be the same about one of your political parties over there, and what really makes them tick.
Yes.
And obviously Nigel Farage, who led the UKIP party, but did not form the UKIP party, I hastily add, was the person who led me and 600 and odd other people into the general election of 2015. So that is where the significance comes, insofar as I was trying to unite people on a voluntary front in UKIP, trying to get them on the same page, because, you know, there was a guy there called Stuart Wheeler who was one of their sponsors, and I remember him being caught saying that it was like herding cats. and that was the people, he was talking about the people in UKIP. So Stuart Wheeler had made, I think it's money in gambling and the casinos. But Stuart, if you're out there, please change, please say something if that's not correct. But yes, he was a big wheeler and dealer in UKIP. And, I was lucky or unlucky enough, depending on which way you look at it, to stand for the general election. And I learned so much. It's an unpaid role. So most people have their own businesses to actually be able to stand. So I guess I was in the minority. I was a housewife with a husband and 2 children, and I was subsidized by a couple of people who believed in me, and they put money towards my election. But that doesn't decry the fact that I actually spent possibly 6 days, possibly even 7 days a week for a year and a half committed to the cause, because I truly believed that we needed to leave the European Union. But I wasn't prepared for what happened next.
All right. So now the reason why I bring this up, because Nigel Farage at one time was really someone that I looked up to. Now, our channel is called Advocates for Direct Democracy, and Nigel Farage was sort of championing this idea. So, of course, I was naturally attracted to that, and I was really impressed with a lot of the speeches that he did in the European Parliament. But maybe you can explain what has happened to Nigel Farage in the last couple of years, perhaps. He suddenly has a change of heart. It seems like he's kind of going away from his, from some of the beliefs. For instance, direct democracy. It doesn't seem like he's championing that anymore. It seems like a different Nigel Farage now.
Well, I'm not sure he's been cloned at all, but I remember back in February 2015, and I was standing in the Stroud constituency, and there was an incinerator being built. And it needed the approval of the whole of the county council. So that's like 1/52nd of the British Isles. That's your county. It's like your state in the USA. We had this Gloucestershire County Council. I stood as a parliamentary candidate in one of the regions, but the council was still going on. They still had their elected members, of which 3 were UKIP councillors. And it was evenly balanced, was the council. You had almost as many Labour people as Tories. And UKIP had not been party to the original decision to have an incinerator built, which happened to be in my constituency. So these people were having to make a decision in a bigger area. Like, they covered a much bigger area than the area that I was standing in. And I didn't have a UKIP representative for my area. So I said to the UKIP people, please do not vote on this. You have no need to vote on this. You were not party to the original decision. But these 3 UKIP people, councillors at the time, it was as if I was like the invisible man. And I was trying to squirrel messages to them in the council meeting, which is allowable if you get the person, a person goes along and can pass messages on. And I was sat in the public gallery. So I passed this message on, please do not do this. This is foolhardy, because the people in my constituency do not want an incinerator, which potentially causes deformities in unborn children, to be built. And depending on the way the wind was blowing, there was an increased chance of these deformities. So I'm thinking, well, okay, I was unfortunate in the fact that I was standing in a constituency which I didn't live in, but I put myself into the position of those people who lived in that constituency and thought, well, would I want my unborn child to have those, to be subject to those risks? But of course, they did a deal with the ruling Tories, and even though they didn't have to make a decision, they could have just abstained. They actually voted with the Tories. And it was at that point in February 2015 that I just realized, wow, not only politics is dirty, but it's actually all about doing deals. And really, who is UKIP anyway? So then, of course, I went to another meeting and they said, well, Caroline, you've been doing this for over a year now. You've been campaigning for UKIP. And I was trying to get all these people onto some sort of central email list. And I was sharing material that came from a group called 38 Degrees. Well, UKIP didn't want to be associated with 38 Degrees. But I don't know if I'm like you, but I will share material, or certainly would share material at that time that was of good content, that resonated with my heart. I didn't care whether it came from the left or the right or the, up or the down. It did not matter so long as I felt this was the truth. And I started sharing this 38-degree material about e-petitions about the transatlantic trade and investment partnership. And I got a warning message from the solicitor in UKIP that says, Caroline, if you are going to circulate matters pertaining to 38 degrees, we will consider you sacked from UKIP. So I had a really tough decision because my friends had been going out on the doorstep with me for so long. I'd helped get people into the European Parliament for UKIP. And yet here was I potentially high and dry with a decision of, do I go on? Does somebody else get parachuted in? And yet I'd spent 13 months trying to soften the ground in a really, really difficult area. So I basically said, okay, I'll keep going. So I stopped circulating the 38 degrees material. I had to accept the council's decision that an incinerator was going to be built. But from that moment on, I think it's fair to say that I knew I was never, ever going to get the public's backing for my, inaugural coming on to becoming a fully fledged MP. So I think, who was it? The Tories got the role in the end. And this is one of the constituencies, one of the 32 constituencies out of 650, which has a big question mark even to this day of the amount of money that was expended on the winning MP's campaign. So only one person has ever been taken to court, and that was an MP, a Tory MP in Kent, and he was exonerated. So what was I to do? What can you say? I had about £10,000, 20,000 Australian dollars to do a campaign for a year, and that I had to use newspapers to advertise. I mean, doing a newspaper campaign is about £3,000 at that time. And of course, the big part is the Blues and the Reds. They don't have the financial constraints that somebody like myself, who was having to fund myself and get other people on board. They didn't have those problems, even to the fact that when I stood for Parliament, I actually, on my literature, had to put my home address. Now, you see, when you're working for one of the major parties, you get given a PO box number. Somebody else deals with all that. So the people in that constituency, whether they love you or hate you, they don't know where you live. But when you were with UKIP, you were like, it was like open season.
So it just, you just proved, just like other people that are trying to make a difference in society by running for politics, that the system itself, the system of representative democracy, no longer works. No. And this is a great example of it. So that's why I brought up the UKIP reference, because I just wanted people to know about your past experience with running, or if people wanted to run for politics, these are some of the hurdles that they're up against. And essentially, when people say that, well, let me ask you a question. When people come up to you and ask you, I want to change things for the better, and I'm going to run as an MP for one of the major parties, or even maybe for a smaller so-called independent party, what type of advice would you tell them?
I saw so many people join the Tory party. In fact, there's somebody on my timeline who said, "Oh, the Tories, they're saying they're making the right noises about mental health." Well, hang on. The Tory party, the Labour Party, have tried to indoctrinate our children over the years, which has undoubtedly increased the number of mental health issues we have. And so just because they happen to make a throwaway comment or some sort of manifesto statement just before this general election, that makes things all right. No, it doesn't. I mean, why aren't we looking longer term? Next year, next September, we've got Stonewall dictating to our primary schools and ensuring that all our 5-year-olds know all about the LGBT agenda. Well, I don't know about you, Nick, but when I was age 5, I was not interested in knowing anything about the LGBT agenda. I probably was more interested in what I was having for lunch and what I was having for tea and who I was going to play out with after school.
Yeah, here in Canada, we're having the same issues with the, and again, I have nothing against the LGBT community whatsoever, but it seems like our liberal politicians, they have this agenda where they want to shove it down everybody's throat. And again, everybody should be free to live the way they want to live, and I have no issues with it. But when they're forcing you to do something, then it doesn't become liberal anymore. It's not freedom. And again, I want to stress this out that I have no issues with the LGBT community whatsoever.
Well, most of the people in the LGBT community do not want this thrust on the 5-year-old down 5-year-olds' throats.
Yes, and actually, you're right. I have been talking to some people that are gay or whatever the case may be, lesbian or trans, and they don't like it either. They want everybody to make their own opinions without any government interference. And you're right. I mean, what does a 5-year-old know? I mean, someone at that age has to be taught the basics, the fundamentals. I mean, not sexual preferences or positions or whatever the case may be. So, again, this is what politics does. It's a one-size-fits-all solution. I wish people would start waking up and realizing that the representative system is a failure, no matter where you live. It has failed for many years, and it will continue to fail. Now, I've seen a lot of your videos, Caroline, and you do a fantastic job with passing out the information. A lot of the information you pass out is absolutely astounding. Now, what are your stance? What's your stance on direct democracy?
Oh, I thought you might ask me that. Well, of course, you remember I was interviewed by Mike over in Australia. He's a big advocate. Right. And I know I'm not going to vote in this next general election. And, anybody watching, if you are part of a party, you go to the doorstep, you say, this is my manifesto, this is what I represent, do you like it or lump it, sort of thing. That's the bottom line. And direct democracy is quite different to that. I mean, originally, I was an advocate for having independent MPs. So those are the people who were supposed to take back to Parliament what their overall constituents really wanted. So I guess I don't know what's going to happen. The Houses of Parliament is up for grabs. It could just turn into a museum. The direct democracy seems we need to have a banner to go behind, to unite. And I don't see having I've been made well aware of the leading people in the yellow vests have been sponsored by Mossad and other organisations in the UK to circumvent the truth, if you like. So we have to work with some sort of banner, and I see that only direct democracy appears to be the banner where people can go behind not really have to commit themselves to their innermost wants or needs, but I think it's more of a community situation where we don't actually need a parliament, because I don't think we're going to have a parliament anyway in the next year or so with the impact of the Lisbon Treaty.
Yeah, I totally agree with you 100%. And going back to France with the Yellow Vest movement, it has been co-opted by many groups, especially here in Canada. We had a Yellow Vest rally out west. And essentially what it was a bunch of right-wingers that were basically they were petitioning, or not really petitioning, but they were using the Yellow Vest movement in support of oil and gas energy. So it wasn't even about the RIC or about direct democracy. It had actually nothing to do with that. It was actually about supporting oil and gas, because if anybody who's not from Canada, a lot of our gas and petroleum comes from provinces like Alberta. So you have to really be careful when you hear a Yellow Vest, because the actual original intent of the Yellow Vest was to implement direct democracy. And again, you don't have to take my word for it. You can actually watch videos by Vanessa Beeley. I believe she's from England also. She's an independent journalist. And she said that the reason why there is a Yellow Vest is not necessarily because of the gas tax. That was probably the final straw that broke the camel's back. But it's because the majority of French people want direct democracy. They want the RIC. And they no longer need political parties to facilitate the politics. They want the people to handle that, because of these austerities that are happening in France and all over the world, that again are facilitated by corporations, and they use the politicians to essentially put them in play. So yeah, people have to really be careful, and they have to do the research with the Yellow Vest, and they have to be careful which groups they associate themselves. Just because they're called the Yellow Vest doesn't necessarily mean they're the Yellow Vest that you think. So that's something that I wanted to mention. And I know Mike Holt is. I've spoken to Mike, and he's a great guy, and he is all about direct democracy for sure. So he's totally legit.
Now, Caroline, I want about it. When I was standing for UKIP, one of the aspects on their manifesto in 2015 was a support of fracking. And that sort of polarized people on the doorstep. And at the time, I really didn't understand the potential impact of fracking until much later on. And then I thought, well, hang on. So we're forcing, as a political party, fracking down the throats of the potential electorate. But this was something that actually the Tory party really wanted. So we were like, I don't know, lambs to the slaughter. People were saying, we like your policies, but we don't like the policy of fracking. And now I'm not sure that I like fracking either. And at the start of this general election, I don't know if you're aware, but Boris Johnson and the Tory party had said, oh, we're not going to do fracking anymore. And then 3 days into the election campaign, they said, oh, well, we changed our minds. It might not be. We might still allow it. I mean, it's like Boris Johnson said on one of his days of campaigning, he said, I'm not going to have a drink until at the end of the election. 20 minutes later, he's pictured with a pint. So this is how fragile and how so stupid that people support these people. They're literally laughing in your face. And I just don't know. I mean, I was reading through several newspapers today, the Sunday Times, the Observer, and the Daily Mail. And, people say, well, why are you reading mainstream? But there's always going to be some good content in each of those newspapers. It's for you to find it and for you to join the dots. And I read an article by Liam Fox. Now, Liam Fox is a disgraced minister. But despite him being a great disgraced minister, he actually was our trade minister from 2016 to 2019. This is the sort of parliament we have. It's full of disgraced people, but they just pick themselves up, or rather the establishment picks themselves up and then continues with them. So you've got Liam Fox, who had, with his boyfriend at the time, had been doing all these trade deals, going on these meetings all over the world, and these meetings hadn't necessarily been approved. And it was really only the Guardian newspaper that covered this. You see, this is how they split the left and the right. So many right-wingers would never read The Guardian. So they wouldn't be aware that Liam Fox had been allegedly doing all these untoward activities. But yet, you know, he then gets rewarded with, being 2016 to 2019, being our trade minister and being an authority, you know, writing articles in the Times, just like Boris Johnson does. I mean, what's it about? It's like if you're a failure, or rather you're a chosen person who chooses to fail and not do the right thing, you are rewarded. So I'm not saying, you know, they are chosen. I was reading about the Committee of 300 again today. Are you familiar with the Committee of 300?
I am, yes.
So you've got the Illuminati. It's not the top notch, but it's pretty high on the agenda of who's influential in the world, and they're probably the second layer down. And you've got the 300 top names include Queen Elizabeth II, Prince Philip, Prince Charles, Princess Anne, and Prince William. And then you've got people who've been associated with the Bank of England, like Mervyn King, and you've got Mark Carney, and then you've got, who else have you got? People like David Cameron, who was our Prime Minister, together with Nick Clegg and George Osborne, who was a Chancellor of Exchequer. All these people, they may get ridiculed in the press, but at the end of the day, they're part of who governs the world. So who's laughing now?
No, I totally agree with you. And, President Obama, when he ran 2 terms, he campaigned on hope and change. So, all Americans at that time were suffering. Again, he took over a bad economy, and it's not like he made it better. He made it actually worse. But instead of jailing the bankers like the people of Iceland did, and what he did was he actually rewarded them by bailing them out. And now, since he's retired, he's no longer in politics. He's still involved some way, maybe to endorse certain candidates. But he's now on a speaking engagement, and he's pulling in roughly maybe $400,000 to $500,000 per speaking event. Maybe a little bit less, maybe a little bit more. But the point of the matter is that he did his job, not for the people, but he did his job for the donors, and now the donors are rewarding him now. And apparently now he just purchased a multi-million-dollar mansion somewhere in the United States. I can't remember where, but the point of the matter is again, representative democracy is such a hypocrisy. It's not representative. It's not democracy. At the end of the day, the people have to stand up and speak out. I mean, that's what democracy is all about. When you consult with the people. And that's not happening now, no matter where you are, Canada, England, UK, States, it's all the same. These people are they're just basically, what's the word? Hired guns, I guess, for the establishment, for the multi corporations. And I know England is really bad. The poverty is pretty bad in England. Here in Canada, it's really getting bad also. And a lot of people are suffering. And I don't know, Caroline. I mean, I've seen your work, and it's great work. But do you actually see people starting to come around? Maybe they're starting to become awake.
Well, it's funny you should say that, because one of the guys on Facebook said to me last night, Caroline, he said, I don't see your posts anymore on Facebook. And I said, well, no, because I've been shadow banned. I've been shadow banned for probably best part of 2 months now, and I'm not allowed to post until March of next year. And I know what will happen. In March of next year, I'll probably do a video. I'll put it into 4 groups, and that'll I'll be banned for another 6 months. So it's the end. And I know other people have tried, different profiles, but of course they can track you with a VPN. So, but the success, what I saw last night was a guy saying, well, sorry to hear that, but keep going, don't give up. He said, I have learnt virtually all this new stuff from your videos and your videos only. And I thought, wow, that really, really has impacted on somebody's life. But it's not just that. I mean, I was very brave to put my head above the parapet and do a few Lisbon Treaty videos at the beginning of the year, February, March, April time. And that was, although the Lisbon Treaty had been signed 10 years ago, well, in 2007, 12 years ago, it came into effect on the 1st of December 2009. And that was with ourselves and the European Union. And that basically put us into a total different ball game and put us underneath the EU constitution. So that's why we're never going to get any justice through our court system. And the number of spin-offs from people, actually me going in and leading the charge to open up the conversation to, why is nobody talking about the Lisbon Treaty? I mean, I ended up with one of the videos I did has had 470,000 hits. Now, if you could have just got £1 for every hit, why would I be bothered about politics? But of course, you don't get paid, and that was Facebook. But that just shows I will never get that number of hits again, because it will now be engineered that it will never, ever happen. I can't share into groups. And, as I say, a third of the Brexiteers seem to have just fallen by the wayside. But to think that almost 500,000, I guess essentially British people, will have seen what I've had to say, on both sides, but mainly on the Brexit side, that must have had an impact, because you had all these other people then saying, right, I'm going to be brave enough and talk about the Lisbon Treaty. So that's an impact, positive impact, I hope. Painful, though.
Again, I've seen you on Facebook, and we've chatted, and I've seen the videos, and you are definitely making an impact on a lot of people. So, and a lot of people are paying attention for sure.
Oh, and I'm really happy. Dewsbury. Do you remember when I spoke in Dewsbury? Dewsbury is a big Muslim town in Yorkshire, and it's not ever so far away from where I was born. But you see, you have a lot of flight out of that particular area. And there's obviously a lot of people that are still impacted. It's big on the grooming gangs. And of course, historically, the police have turned a blind eye. And the locals, they're called a group called Yorkshire Patriots. A guy, Dave North, leads the Yorkshire Patriots. And he invited me to speak a year ago in Scarborough, which is another part of Yorkshire. So I went along there in the October, and it was in the snow, and there were more police than there were patriots. And I just thought, oh my gosh, have I done the right thing? But I just talked about Melanie Shaw and her incarceration in a prison in the UK, about telling the truth. She has a good idea on which MPs, which judges have been involved in paedophilia, grooming, etc. So this is not Muslims grooming now, this is white grooming. And then so a year later they invite me back. They're going to different towns each time. So I go to a place called Dewsbury, which is actually translated as Davidstown. But I would say most of the people now are Muslim in that town. So that's in the UK. So I speak, they've had to, tell the police that they're organising a Yorkshire Patriots event. So all the police from the whole of West Yorkshire, so that's I say a big quarter, if that's possible, of the whole of Yorkshire, a huge number of police attended that event, allegedly to stop any trouble. So they vastly outnumbered the patriots who were attending. There was police helicopters overhead. The locals were minding their own business, but they stopped to listen at the other side of 2 police cordons. And so the police had to stand and listened to that speech, whether they liked it or not. And of course, I talked about grooming, I talked about paedophilia, I talked about it be not just in the judicial system, but with the police as well. So you can imagine how they must have felt, because there must have been some of them thinking, oh my gosh, she's talking about us. And they couldn't run, they couldn't hide, they had to be there. So that was, you know, I had a captive audience. For once, I had a bigger audience that I would normally get.
Well, Caroline, I just want to say, keep up the great work. You're doing a fantastic job of, spreading the truth. So, and I want to invite people onto YouTube to Caroline's channel, which is called Caroline Stevens Seeking the Truth. And I want to thank you, Caroline, for doing this.
Thank you for having me on your show.
Thank you so much, Caroline.